Captain Jack Thompson stood at perfect attention in the gleaming hall of the Allied Species Combat Committee. The massive chamber, carved from a single asteroid, housed representatives from 27 spacefaring civilizations. Floating screens displayed his previous combat trials, showing what the committee saw as embarrassingly poor accuracy rates with standard energy weapons. General Blue, the tall, angular commander of the Stellar Empire's elite forces, tapped his metal fingers against the crystalline table. His silver skin reflected the harsh light from above as he spoke. These results are disappointing. Humanity claims to be ready for coalition membership, yet your soldiers can barely achieve 70% accuracy with our basic weapons. Thompson kept his face neutral, though his jaw tightened slightly. Behind him, his team of 5 human soldiers remained equally still. They had spent months preparing for this moment, and everything was going according to plan. "The data speaks for itself," said Admiral Red. Her bioluminescent scales pulsing with what humans had learned was amusement. "Even our cadets achieved 95% accuracy within their first training cycle. After 3 cycles, anything less than 99.9% is considered failure." The chamber filled with murmurs of agreement. Some committee members didn't even try to hide their laughter. A few were already gathering their data tablets, clearly seeing no reason to prolong this session. Thompson cleared his throat. "If the committee would allow, I'd like to provide some context for these results." Context. General Blue's metallic laugh echoed through the chamber. "Mathematics needs no context, Captain. Your species simply lacks the neural development for precise energy manipulation. It's nothing to be ashamed of. You are, after all, quite young as a spacefaring race." Thompson took a careful step forward. "With respect, General, humanity has been defending itself long before we developed energy weapons. Our solar system lies in what we call the Cosmic Shooting Gallery, an area with frequent asteroid activity and debris fields. We had to develop our targeting systems with this reality in mind." "Ah yes." Admiral Red's scales flickered with more apparent amusement. "Your projectile weapons. Fascinating relics. Though I fail to see how throwing metal balls through space qualifies as advanced military technology." Thompson allowed himself a small smile. "Perhaps a demonstration would help illustrate my point. We've brought some of our standard equipment, with the committee's permission." General Blue waved a dismissive hand. "By all means, Captain. Though I fail to see how demonstrating even more primitive technology will help your case." The human team began unpacking their equipment. The committee members watched with varying degrees of interest as they assembled what looked like outdated targeting systems and weapons that seemed better suited for a museum than a military presentation. "These are what we call railguns," Thompson explained, his voice steady and professional. "Modified for space combat, but based on the same principles we've been using for planetary defense for over a century." "Fascinating," General Blue said, not bothering to hide his sarcasm. "And what exactly is the effective range of these artifacts?" "That depends entirely on what you're trying to hit, General." Thompson's team had finished their setup. "And more importantly, when you're trying to hit it." The committee members exchanged confused glances. Admiral Red's scales had shifted to a pattern that indicated puzzlement. "When?" "Yes, Admiral. You see, in our solar system, hitting what you can see was never enough. We had to learn to hit what wasn't there yet, or wouldn't be there for several minutes, hours, or even days." General Blue's metallic features shifted into what passed for a frown. "You're not making sense, Captain. A target is either there, or it isn't." Thompson's smile widened just slightly. "That, General, is where humans and the allied species seem to differ in our basic approach. Would you like to see what I mean?" The committee members glanced at each other. Finally, General Blue nodded. "Very well, Captain. Show us these skills you claim to possess. Though I warn you, further waste of this committee's time will not be looked upon favorably." "Understood, General." Thompson turned to his team and nodded. "Let's show them how humans really shoot." The assessment chamber was a massive sphere carved into the asteroid's core. Holographic targets floated at various distances, their positions randomly changing every few seconds. The Allied Species Committee members watched from their observation deck above, their expressions ranging from bored to mildly curious. "Standard qualification course," General Blue announced, his metallic voice echoing through the chamber. "Let's begin with basic energy weapon proficiency, as is tradition." Thompson nodded to his team. Private Mike stepped forward first, taking position with the committee's standard-issue plasma rifle. The weapon hummed to life in his hands, its crystal core glowing with stored energy. "Begin sequence," Admiral Red commanded, her scales now a dull shade of gray that humans had learned meant professional disinterest. Mike took his shots. The plasma bolts flew through the chamber, missing targets by margins that made several committee members wince. His final accuracy rate flashed on the screens, 68.5%. "Perhaps your soldier is nervous," suggested one of the committee members, trying to be diplomatic. "Let's continue with the rest of the team," General Blue said, making no attempt to hide his impatience. One by one, Thompson's soldiers demonstrated their skills with energy weapons. None scored above 75%. Some committee members had stopped watching entirely, focusing instead on their data tablets. "Well, Captain," General Blue said, "I believe we've seen enough tow. Request permission to proceed with human weapons demonstration," Thompson interrupted, something that made several alien observers bristle with surprise. Admiral Red's scales flickered with renewed interest at this breach of protocol. "Granted," she said before General Blue could object, "though I fail to see how this will improve your standing." Thompson's team quickly set up their equipment. The railguns looked absurdly bulky compared to the sleek energy weapons. Private Tom began attaching what looked like primitive targeting computers to his helmet. "These devices," Thompson explained, "are what we call gravity mappers. They're based on technology we developed for calculating asteroid trajectories in our solar system." "Fascinating," General Blue said dryly. "Shall we use the same target course?" "Actually," Thompson said, "we'd like to demonstrate in a more dynamic environment. Could we move to the asteroid field training ground?" This request caused a stir among the committee members. The asteroid field was used for advanced fleet training, not basic qualification tests. Admiral Red's scales shifted to a bright pattern of surprise and curiosity. "That would be highly irregular," General Blue protested. "So are we," Thompson replied simply. After a brief discussion among the committee members, they agreed. The entire group moved to the massive observation deck overlooking the training field. Outside, hundreds of artificial asteroids moved in carefully controlled patterns, simulating natural space debris. "This is a waste of time," General Blue muttered. "No one uses this field for marksmanship training. The moving objects make precise targeting impossible." Thompson's team took their positions at different firing points. Each soldier ran quick diagnostics on their railguns while their targeting computers processed the asteroid field's gravitational mathematics. "Ready, sir," Private Tom reported. Thompson turned to the committee. "Before we begin, I should explain something about human combat doctrine. In our history, we learned that the most dangerous threats are often the ones you can't see. Philosophy will not improve your accuracy, Captain," General Blue said. "No," Thompson agreed, "but it might help you understand what you're about to see." He turned to his team. "Remember your training. Calculate twice. Shoot once." The soldiers began firing into what appeared to be empty space. Their railguns made dull thumping sounds as they launched their projectiles. Not a single shot hit any of the visible targets. Admiral Red's scales had shifted to a color humans didn't recognize. "Captain, your team isn't even trying to hit the targets." Thompson checked his wrist computer and smiled. "No, Admiral, we're not. But then again, those aren't our targets." The committee members exchanged confused looks as the human team continued to fire with apparent randomness into the asteroid field. What they couldn't see, yet was that each shot was precisely calculated to arrive at a specific point in space at a very specific time. The asteroid field training ground stretched out before them like a dancer's stage, with chunks of rock spinning in their carefully controlled orbits. The observation deck's force field kept everyone safe while providing a clear view of what appeared to be the humans' greatest military embarrassment. Captain, General Blue's patience was clearly wearing thin. Your team has now fired 37 shots. Not a single one has hit any target. His metallic fingers drummed against the railing. This is beyond disappointing. It's becoming embarrassing. Thompson kept his eyes on his wrist computer, occasionally nodding to his team members who continued to fire their railguns in seemingly random directions. Interesting thing about space combat, General. Sometimes the shortest distance between 2 points isn't a straight line. Private Tom fired another shot, the railgun's magnetic coils humming with power. The projectile curved around a large asteroid, using its gravity to alter its trajectory. The committee members tracked it until it disappeared into the darkness of space. Another miss, Admiral Red observed, her scales now showing patterns that indicated both boredom and irritation. Though I must admit, the gravitational assists are somewhat impressive. Thank you, Admiral, Thompson said, still studying his computer. We learned that trick from watching comets. Nature's been playing gravitational pool in our solar system for billions of years. We just took notes. Several committee members had started drafting their rejection notices. Others were engaging in private conversations through their neural links, not even bothering to hide their disinterest. Only Admiral Red seemed to still be paying attention, her scientific curiosity apparently stronger than her disappointment. Private Lisa fired 3 more shots in quick succession. Each projectile used a different asteroid's gravity to alter its course before vanishing into different sectors of space. The targeting computer on her helmet glowed as it calculated complex orbital mechanics in real time. 52 shots, General Blue announced. 0 hits. Captain Thompson, I believe we've seen enough of this. Exhibition. Thompson held up his hand. Just a few more minutes, General. You see, in space, time is as important as direction. Every shot we fired has a purpose. They're all heading somewhere, or rather, they'll all be somewhere. Private Mike launched another series of projectiles. His targeting computer showed green confirmation lights for each shot. Final vector calculations confirmed, sir, he reported. Good, Thompson said. Now we wait. Wait. General Blue's metallic features shifted into what humans had learned was an expression of supreme annoyance. Wait for what? For all the pieces to come together, Thompson replied calmly. Space is big, General. Really big. But it's also predictable. Every object follows the laws of physics. If you know these laws well enough, you can make some educated guesses about where things might be, or where they're trying to hide. Admiral Red's scales suddenly shifted to a pattern of alert attention. Her sensor implants had detected something. There's an energy distortion in Sector 7. Yes, Thompson said. There should be. About now. The first of our projectiles should be arriving at their designated coordinates. The committee members watched as more energy distortions appeared in different sectors. Each one corresponded to the arrival of a human projectile at its calculated destination. The patterns were starting to form a massive 3-dimensional grid in space. What exactly are you doing, Captain? Admiral Red asked, her scales now showing genuine interest. Thompson finally looked up from his computer. Creating a net, Admiral. Or more accurately, we created one about 3 minutes ago. The pieces are just now getting into position. He checked his watch, and in approximately 45 seconds, we're going to catch something that really shouldn't be here. The committee members exchanged uncertain looks. General Blue's metallic features had shifted from annoyance to something approaching concern. In the asteroid field before them, the seemingly random pattern of human projectiles was about to reveal its true purpose. A strange silence fell over the observation deck as the energy distortions multiplied across the asteroid field. Thompson's team had stopped firing. their railguns cooling in the recycled air. The only sound was the soft hum of the force field and the occasional beep from their targeting computers. 10 seconds, Thompson announced quietly. Admiral Red scales were rapidly shifting through patterns that indicated intense scanning activity. Her built-in sensors were detecting something unusual, but she couldn't quite identify what it was. 5 seconds, Thompson continued. General Blue stepped forward, his metallic face showing the first signs of uncertainty. Captain, what exactly are we supposed to be? He never finished his sentence. At that moment, the space between 3 of the larger asteroids seemed to ripple, like heat waves over hot pavement. Several of the human projectiles had arrived at their calculated positions, their paths intersecting at precise coordinates. There you are, Thompson said with satisfaction. The ripple in space grew more pronounced. Suddenly, a ship appeared where empty space had been just moments before. It was sleek, predatory, and definitely not supposed to be there. Its stealth field flickered and died as more human projectiles arrived, disrupting its cloaking systems with precisely calculated kinetic impacts. The committee erupted in chaos. Admiral Red scales blazed with alarm patterns, while General Blue's metallic skin reflected the emergency lights that had automatically activated. Impossible, one committee member shouted. This is a secure testing facility. Stealth technology of that level. Another began. Only the Phantom Fleet has. Thompson held up his hand, silencing the commotion. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, allow me to explain what you're seeing. That ship has been watching your facility for at least 3 weeks. We detected its gravity signature the moment we arrived. Detected. General Blue's voice had lost its condescending tone. Our most advanced sensors showed nothing. That's because you were looking for energy signatures, Thompson explained. We learned long ago that those can be masked. But gravity, that's harder to hide. Every object with mass leaves a dent in space. If you know how to look for these dents, well, he gestured to the now fully visible spy ship. The ship tried to move, but it was trapped. The human projectiles had created a complex web of gravitational distortions, using the asteroid's own fields to create a trap. Every possible escape vector was blocked by carefully positioned shots that had been fired minutes earlier. But your accuracy scores. Admiral Red scales showed confusion. The targeting tests, Thompson smiled, were exactly what we wanted them to be. Tell me, Admiral, if you were commanding that spy ship, would you have worried about a species that couldn't hit a stationary target at point-blank range? Understanding dawned on the committee members' faces. The humans hadn't been missing their targets. They had been hiding their true capabilities. Private Tom spoke up from his position. Sir, the ship is attempting to power up its main drive. Let them try, Thompson replied. Those projectiles we fired aren't just sitting there. Each one is traveling in a precisely calculated orbit. If they move more than 50 meters in any direction, they'll trigger a cascade of kinetic impacts that would tear their hull apart. General Blue stepped closer to the force field, studying the trapped vessel with new respect. You turned the entire asteroid field into a weapon. No, General, Thompson corrected him. We turned it into a trap. One that only works because everyone was so convinced we couldn't shoot straight. He turned to face the committee. Sometimes, the best way to hit your target is to convince everyone you can't. The spy ship hung motionless in space, caught in a web of human ingenuity and orbital mechanics. Around the observation deck, the committee members were starting to see humanity's primitive weapons and poor accuracy in a very different light. The captured spy ship hung in space like a caught fish in a net of invisible forces. Its sleek hull occasionally reflected light from the asteroid field's navigation beacons, but otherwise, it remained perfectly still. Inside the observation deck, the mood had shifted dramatically from mockery to intense interest. Captain, Admiral Red Scales now showed a pattern of deep analytical thought. You mentioned detecting this vessel 3 weeks ago. Why wait until now to reveal it? Thompson walked over to one of the display screens and brought up a series of gravitational maps, because we needed to understand its routine. Every ship, even a stealth ship, has patterns. They need to change position to maintain optimal scanning angles, adjust their orbit to compensate for gravitational drift, rotate to manage heat signatures. General Blue's metallic features had rearranged themselves into what humans recognized as deep concentration, and each of those movements creates a gravitational ripple, no matter how small. Exactly, Thompson nodded. We spent those 3 weeks mapping those ripples, predicting where they would be at this exact moment. Every missed shot we fired was calculated to arrive at a specific point in spacetime where we knew that ship would have to be. Private Lisa's targeting computer beeped, drawing everyone's attention. "Sir, they're trying to realign their cloaking field." "Let them," Thompson replied. "The magnetic wake from our projectiles has created a disruption shell around their hull. Even if they get their cloak back online, they won't be able to hide." One of the committee members, a tall being with crystalline features, stepped forward. "This is beyond simple marksmanship. You've developed an entirely new form of space warfare." Thompson shook his head. "Not new, Ambassador. We've been doing this since we first started defending Earth from asteroids. When you live in a cosmic shooting gallery, you learn to think differently about space combat." Admiral Red moved closer to the display screens, her scales now showing patterns of intense scientific curiosity. "Show me these gravitational maps again." As Thompson brought up the detailed scans, the committee members gathered around. The displays showed complex webs of gravitational forces, with tiny distortions marking the spy ship's previous positions. Each distortion had been carefully measured and used to predict the ship's future location. "Here," Thompson pointed to a particular pattern, "is where they made their first mistake. They established a regular schedule for their sensor suites. Every 48 hours, they had to adjust their position by exactly 0.3 degrees to maintain optimal coverage of your facility." General Blue's metallic fingers traced the pattern on the screen. And that movement, however small, created a predictable gravitational signature, which we could use to calculate their future positions, Thompson confirmed. "Space is mostly empty, but it's not inactive. Gravity affects everything, all the time. We humans learn to use that to our advantage." Private Mike's voice came from his station. "Sir, the ship is attempting to communicate." "Of course they are," Thompson smiled. "They just realized they're trapped in a web they can't see, can't detect, and can't escape. Their only option now is to talk." Admiral Red's scales rippled with what humans had learned was amusement. "It seems we severely underestimated humanity's approach to space combat, Captain. Your apparent lack of accuracy with our weapons was a tactical choice," Thompson finished. "When everyone expects you to use energy weapons, they defend against energy weapons. When everyone thinks you can't shoot straight, they don't look too closely at where you're actually aiming." The spy ship tried one last, desperate maneuver. A small burst from its maneuvering thrusters pushed it slightly to the left, directly into the path of 3 converging projectiles that had been waiting patiently in their calculated orbits. The ship quickly returned to its original position. "And that," Thompson said, "is why we prefer kinetic weapons. No shields, no matter how advanced, can ignore basic physics." The next hour brought a flurry of activity to the observation deck. Security teams had arrived to secure the area, while intelligence officers began analyzing data from the captured spy ship. In the midst of this controlled chaos, Captain Thompson and his team stood calmly at their stations, monitoring the complex web of projectiles that kept the intruder trapped. "The ship's crew is requesting asylum," announced Private Tom, looking up from his communications display. "They're offering to share intelligence about the Phantom Fleet's operations in this sector." General Blue's metallic face showed what humans had learned to recognize as a mix of satisfaction and concern. "The Phantom Fleet. We've been trying to track their movements for years. Their stealth technology has always given them the advantage. Until now," Admiral Red added, her scales showing a pattern of thoughtful calculation. Captain Thompson, I believe we owe you and humanity an apology. We judged your capabilities based on our own standards, our own way of thinking. Thompson shook his head. No apology needed. Admiral, we counted on being underestimated. It's a strategy that served humanity well throughout our history. Private Lisa's targeting computer beeped again. Sir, I'm detecting power fluctuations in their main reactor. They might be attempting a core overload. Typical Phantom Fleet tactics, General Blue growled. They'd rather destroy themselves than be captured. Thompson remained calm. Private Mike, adjust projectiles 7 through 12. Tighten the orbital loop around their engine section. Mike's fingers flew over his controls. Outside, several of the hovering projectiles shifted their positions slightly, using the asteroid's gravity to maintain new orbits that focused more pressure on the spy ship's engine compartment. Message from the ship's captain, Tom reported. Core overload sequence aborted. Please, don't let the projectiles get any closer. A small smile crossed Thompson's face. Remind them that any attempt to destroy their ship will trigger an automatic kinetic response. The same physics they're trying to use against us will ensure their own destruction. Admiral Red moved to stand beside Thompson, her scales now showing a pattern humans hadn't seen before. You've transformed what we saw as primitive weapons into something elegant. Each shot not just a bullet, but a component in a larger machine. That's how we had to think, Thompson explained. Earth's asteroid defense system taught us that space combat isn't about single shots or direct hits. It's about creating zones of control, predicting paths of movement, using gravity as both weapon and shield. The committee members had gathered in a small group, talking quietly among themselves. After several minutes, General Blue approached Thompson. The committee has reached a preliminary decision, he announced, his metallic voice carrying a new tone of respect. We believe humanity's unique approach to space combat could be valuable to the Coalition. More than valuable. Admiral Red interjected, her scales flashing with excitement. Imagine combining your gravitational warfare techniques with our energy weapon systems. The Phantom Fleet wouldn't stand a chance. Thompson glanced at his team, seeing their proud but professional expressions. We'd be honored to share our knowledge, Admiral, though I suspect you'll find our other techniques equally surprising. Other techniques. General Blue's features shifted with interest. Of course, Thompson smiled. After all, if we manage to hide this capability from you, imagine what else we might be keeping in reserve. The observation deck fell silent as the implications of that statement sank in. The committee members looked at the human team with new eyes, suddenly wondering just how much they had underestimated Earth's defenders. Outside, the captured spy ship floated in its invisible cage, a testament to humanity's ability to turn basic physics into an art of war. And in the asteroid field beyond, dozens more human projectiles continued their patient orbits, waiting for targets that hadn't yet revealed themselves. 3 days after the capture of the Phantom Fleet spy ship, Captain Thompson stood once again before the Allied Species Combat Committee. This time, however, the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of mockery, the faces and features of the assembled aliens showed genuine respect. The intelligence gathered from the captured vessel has already proven invaluable, General Blue announced, his metallic features arranged in what humans now recognized as an expression of satisfaction. 3 more Phantom Fleet bases have been identified in neighboring sectors. And more importantly, Admiral Red added, her scales showing patterns of excitement. We've confirmed they've been using similar observation posts near 15 other Coalition facilities. Thompson nodded. They relied too heavily on their stealth technology. Once you know what gravitational signatures to look for, finding their ships becomes much easier. Private Tom stepped forward with a data tablet. Sir, the latest scans are complete. We've identified possible hiding spots for at least 7 more stealth ships in this sector alone. The committee members exchanged looks of astonishment. One of them, a being made of shifting clouds of gas, spoke up. You mean there are more of them? Right now? Of course, Thompson replied calmly. Did you think they would send just one ship to watch such an important facility? He gestured to the main display screen, which showed a complex map of gravitational distortions. We've been tracking their movements since we arrived. Some of them don't even know they're already caught in our orbital nets. General Blue's metallic fingers tapped thoughtfully on the table. You've revolutionized our entire approach to space security, Captain. The Coalition's defensive doctrine will need to be completely rewritten. Not rewritten, Thompson corrected politely. Enhanced. Your energy weapons and shields are incredibly effective for direct combat. Our methods just add another layer of strategy. Admiral Red floated closer to the gravitational map, her scales showing intense analytical patterns. The combination of our technologies with your gravitational warfare techniques, the possibilities are extraordinary. Which brings us to the official business of this session, General Blue announced. He stood, his metallic form catching the light. The committee has voted unanimously to approve humanity's membership in the Coalition. Furthermore, we are proposing the immediate creation of a joint training program. Your officers will instruct our forces in gravitational warfare, while our experts will help humanity master energy weapon systems. Thompson smiled. We would be honored. Though I should warn you, what you've seen is just one application of our defensive thinking. We have other surprises. More surprises. Admiral Red's scales flickered with curiosity. Like what? Well, Thompson said, glancing at his team, let's just say that missing those targets during our qualification tests wasn't our only bit of misdirection. Sometimes the best way to hide your true capabilities is to show only part of them. The committee members stirred uneasily at this revelation. General Blue's features shifted to show what humans had learned was thoughtful amusement. You know, Captain, a few days ago that statement would have irritated me. Now it makes me very glad you're on our side. Thompson looked out through the observation window at the asteroid field, where the captured spy ship was being carefully escorted to a secure facility. In the distance, his team's projectiles continued their silent orbits, maintaining their invisible web of gravitational control. That's the funny thing about space combat, he said quietly. There's no up or down, no simple straight lines. Everything is about perspective, gravity, and patience. Humanity learned those lessons the hard way, defending Earth from cosmic threats. Now we can put those lessons to use defending our new allies. As the committee began discussing the details of humanity's integration into the Coalition, Thompson allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They had come here expecting to be judged, and instead had taught their judges a valuable lesson. Never assume that primitive means simple, and never mistake patience for weakness.